W listopadzie w Toruniu miała miejsce niezwykle ciekawa konferencja pod nazwą Poranek kapitalizmu. Gwoździem programu był profesor Yaron Brook, który debatował z doktorem Dominiakiem na temat tego, czy lepsze jest państwo minimalne, minarchistyczne, czy anarchokapitalizm. Po konferencji udało mi się namówić Yarona na 3-4 krótkie pytania. Zapraszam Was do oglądania. First of all, you said that there are different methods to create the limited state, yeah? Not only the taxation, which is probably the worst, yeah? You said about the lottery today, but there are few different. What do you think is the best, or the 2-3 the best options?
In terms of raising revenue in a limited government, I think the way to raise revenue for a limited government is primarily through voluntary, call it taxation or voluntary revenue. And that is where citizens write a check to the government voluntarily in order to fund the police, the military, and the judiciary. I think one way to avoid free riders is, for example, to announce who paid tax, who paid and who didn't, right? So use social pressure, not coercion, but social pressure on people to contribute towards their own defense and towards their own security. Other ways I could imagine is, and this is just me, this is not Ayn Rand, I could imagine that I consider voting to be not that important, particularly in a truly free market, because voting is just about the people. It's not really about, I can't vote to take your stuff away, right? So voting is minimal. So for example, if you're not a taxpayer, and again, I'm using taxes here as a voluntary thing, then you don't get to vote, right? So in order to vote, you would have to. So there are a variety of ways in which we can incentivize without coercing people to actually voluntarily fund the government. Another way that Ayn Rand proposed was if the two of us have a contract, a legitimate contract, because in the presentation earlier, some illegitimate contracts were discussed, a legitimate contract, then if we want, we could have arbitration and mediation that's private, right? There would be private mediation and arbitration. But if we want the final authority to be the courts, then we would pay a fee when we signed the contracts to the court system to, in a sense, provide that final authority over any dispute that we might have. So I think that's the sense in which we would you would be able to raise revenue. Again, think about government, a truly limited government: police, military, and judiciary. Now, a country like Poland probably doesn't need a military. Well, maybe the Russians are there, so maybe you do. But how much is it going to cost to have a military, a police, and a judiciary? Very little.
Yes.
So even in the United States, where we have a very large military, you could probably cut government spending by 80%, 85%, maybe even 90% if you actually ran the military properly. And if you did that, the amount of revenue to be raised would be relatively small, and the economy would do so well. I mean, think of the economic growth under laissez-faire capitalism. We'd explode. We'd be 100 times richer than we are today. It would be such a small amount of money you would have to pay in order to get the protection of individual rights by government that I think people would happily write a check.
The second question is, how big will be that government? Because I think that we don't need, for instance, in Poland we got 460 people in our parliament, yeah, and it's really much, because when we've got only 3 functions, yeah, and they are working in progress, we don't need so much politics, we don't need so much bureaucrats. So, how big should be the government?
Well, I mean, I think it partially depends on the size of the country, because the purpose of government is to represent the people. So if you could find a way to be representative, but to be small, that would be ideal. In America, it's a very big country. So the House of Representatives in America has 400 and something people. It used to be much, it grows as the United States has grown. The Senate is fixed. 2 senators per state. So as states grow, it has grown. Now it's 100 people. But if Poland has almost as many representatives as the United States, it doesn't make any sense, right? So in terms of the political mechanisms by which a limited government would function. How many representatives, how many houses. I like the American system in the sense that there are two houses, they can veto each other. What you want to make is it very, very difficult to pass laws. You want it to be very thoughtful. You want the laws to muster a lot of support in order to be passed. You want gridlock, in a sense. You want it to be hard. You want a president who can veto bad laws. You want a Supreme Court who can then say, it's not constitutional, you can't pass that law. You want as many checks and balances as possible. And I think the founders of America created a good political system in a sense that you have a Supreme Court and you have appeal courts that go up to the Supreme Court. You have a executive branch that is in charge of executing the laws, but can also veto a law. And then you have legislatures, a legislature who is assigned to coming up with new laws as the world changes and you need to apply individual rights in different ways, right? Because individual rights is not a static thing in its application. For example, with the internet, there's all kind of applications of intellectual property rights that didn't exist before the internet that you have to now assign. So, you know, it really is, it needs to have this separation about how big. I think it's going to depend on the country. I think it depends on how you structure these different things. The other beauty of the American system is not only do we have that at the federal level, but then we have states. So in a sense, the states have some autonomy and some flexibility. So that's another check against the federal government. So the founders created lots of checks and balances, and it's why I think the American system has survived relatively well for such a long period of time, is because of the way it was structured and because of the commitment the founders had to the idea of individual rights and to the government as a protector of those rights.
Okay, you said about the states, and it's again a good point to ask you about the idea of secession. What do you think? Because you said that the government should be the prime and the strongest morality guide, let's say like that, yeah? And what do you think about the idea of secession? Because you don't want the global government, but that the people have the right to create a secession and create their own smaller country, and again.
I don't believe in small countries. I think small countries are stupid. You know, and the problem is that people secede not to increase freedom. People secede because they want somebody of their ethnic group to violate their rights. So if secession is in the name of freedom, well, America seceded from England, right? That's okay. If it's in the name of freedom and if the purpose is to be more free. But if that's the case, if the big government is statist and oppressive and you want to secede to be free, they're going to fight you.
Yeah,
that's true. So what does a right to secede mean? If they're going to fight you. So you have a right to revolution, absolutely. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It says, we have a right to revolt under these terms, and he lists all the offenses that the British Crown has committed against the people of America. And he says, and the Declaration of Independence says, under these conditions, we have a right to revolt. So I believe in the right to revolution. Secession is silly, because who seceded in American history? The South. Why? Because they wanted to maintain their rights oppressing regime of slavery. That's what they seceded for. Secession, typically in the world, is not to establish more freedom. It's to establish less freedom. Look at Europe. Europe is filled with little countries that each compete on how much they can oppress their own people. But it's okay. Do you ever see the movie Braveheart?
Yes.
Yes, famous movie. Freedom. We're going to fight for freedom. What's the freedom they want in Braveheart? They want the freedom to be oppressed by a Scottish king instead of being oppressed by an English king.
Yeah, that's
not a freedom that anybody should fight for. That's not a value, and that's the problem in Europe, is that all the states in Europe are ethnocentric.
Yes, and nationalist.
Well, nationalism, yes, but nationalism is derived from ethnicity or from some shared history. I was in Montenegro, a country of 400,000, and the question is, why do you have Montenegro? Why is there a country called Montenegro? Oh, we have an ancient tribe. Who cares? Why is that the standard for creating a government? No, I mean, I think government should be, in that sense, responsible for larger geographic areas so you don't get this nationalism and ethnocentrism.
Okay, last but not least, I want to ask you about the future, some prediction, because we've got so many new technologies and many people said that they give us a chance to increase our freedom. For instance, they talk about crypto values, Bitcoin, yeah? But I'm not such sure that the new technologies could increase our freedom, because everything can be used in different ways, yeah?
Yes.
And for instance, the technology which create bitcoins can also create the governmental money, which could show every transactions we create, yeah? For instance. So you are rather optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
Well, I don't think it's an issue of optimism or pessimism. The fact is, technology won't give us freedom. Technology is a tool. It's a tool that can be used for evil, right? There will be a day where we will be able to implant a chip in our brain. And now that could be great, right? I'll have the internet accessible to me just by thinking about it. Everything will show up and I'll be able to access that as if it's a memory. I'll have full knowledge of all the library that exists in every encyclopedia, and every article ever written will be accessible to me directly, right? You know, I can imagine that, right? Wow, that is a fabulous technology, but it also will give the government the ability to spy on my brain, to maybe to even try to indoctrinate me through directly into my nervous system. Every technology has this plus or minus. In the hands of the statists, technology is very, very, very dangerous. Look at what they're doing in China. They now have cameras everywhere. They have facial recognition software, and they give every citizen a social score, which determines whether he can get a mortgage, how the government's going to relate to him, all these things. And of course, they can prosecute you if you do things that they don't like. So, and it's wonderful technology. Facial recognition technology is very good, and all, you know, by itself, each piece of the technology is wonderful. But in the hands of evil people, it is an evil technology. And I think the same at the end of the day, even though I don't completely understand the blockchain and cryptocurrency and how they work, I think the same is probably the same is there. Now, to the extent that technology allows us for anonymity and allows us to hide from the authorities, maybe it increases our freedom to an extent. But at the end of the day, we live in the physical world. We don't live in zeros and ones. And it doesn't help make us free in the physical world. So in that sense, I'm neither optimistic or pessimistic, although I generally tend to be about technology, be optimistic, because the value that technology provides our lives is amazing, but not ideologically. Freedom will only come about when we secure the minds of people, when we get them thinking in a particular way. And it's only certain ideas that will lead to freedom. Only certain ideas that can bring about true liberty. And this is why it's so important to read and to talk and to debate and to discuss ideas, because there are pro-liberty ideas and there are anti-liberty ideas. And we have to be out there promoting pro-liberty ideas. And you know, so we just had a debate on anarchism. I believe anarchism is an anti-liberty idea, and it's important to reveal it as an anti-liberty idea. So it's not something that people attempted to follow. So at the end of the day, we will achieve freedom, we will achieve liberty when we can convince enough people through reason to adopt the right ideas about philosophy, about the efficacy of reason, about an objective moral code, about the value of individual rights, and therefore the value of limited government.
Thank you, Professor.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Brook. It was great.
Thank you.
Mam nadzieję, że będzie jeszcze wiele okazji, by zadać chociaż 3-4 krótkie pytania jakimś znanym osobistościom ze świata wolnościowego. Czy ten odcinek się Wam podobał, czy taka forma jest dobra, czy warto by było przeprowadzić analogiczne wywiady z innymi osobistościami znanymi w świecie szeroko pojętych wolnościowców? Jeżeli tak, zostawcie łapkę w górę, komentarz, wpadajcie na Patronite'a i do zobaczenia w kolejnym odcinku. Na razie. Lubię, gdy mówisz mi, pokaż mi swoje towary. Pierogi z węża, przy nich się odprężam. Kanapka z wilka, no mi w kieszeni.